Thank you, Tony. Thank you for welcoming me. I truly am honored to share this platform. As you have correctly indicated, this is a second year running that we are providing this workshop. I think what you have said, Tony, couldn't it be even more truer when you say that this workshop has been structured in such a way that workshop attendees will get a sense of what it feels like to be an RAC member. That get a sense, you get to grips with the proposals that students send. So this will give you a good hindsight in terms of what goes on behind the REC. Just to give you a breakdown of how the workshop is going to be tailored. The structure of the workshop will be divided into 3 sessions, and it will be as follows. Session 1 will take approximately 15 minutes, and we will discuss the rationale of the workshop. In other words, we will explore the challenges and take a look at what is really problematic in obtaining ethical clearance at the Department of Correctional Services, REC, and conclude this session with some FAQs around correctional services research. Session 2, how to deal with methodological and ethical pitfalls in correctional services research, formulates the core of this workshop, and it's going to comprise of 2 subsessions, each looking at methodological followed by ethical pitfalls surrounding correctional services research. Each session will take approximately 45 minutes, which will be inclusive of feedback to the activities. For these activities, Tony will provide you with a link where you will locate these case studies. And then session 3, our last session, the last session will provide opportunities for overall feedback and address some individual queries and concerns should there be. This session is envisaged to last approximately 10 minutes. Now, in as far as the rationale of the workshop is concerned, Tony indicated, and I have to agree that as an REC member of the Department of Correctional Services, I too have observed that there seems to be that growing interest among academics and master's, doctoral students, UNISA, including other universities, as well as independent researchers, to conduct research in and around DCS facilities. However, what I have observed is that students, academics, and researchers alike often struggle to obtain ethical clearance when applying at the DCS-REC, with the result that many of those applications that we receive, they're either disapproved, deferred, or they only receive conditional approval. Now, shown on this slide is a summary of the examples, both methodological as well as ethical pitfalls that have contributed to the disapproval of some of the applications received in the year 2019. Now, these 4 pie charts shown on this slide are just graphical representations of some of the previous REC meetings which I took part in. And just running descriptive stats on the raw data indicates that less than 30% of the applications were approved, I beg your pardon, in all DCS-REC meetings, and more than 70% of the applications were either conditionally approved or outrightly disapproved, if not deferred with conditions for improvement. Thus, on the basis of these stats, the aims and objectives of the workshops are to improve the quality of scholarship by highlighting some of the popular methodological and ethical challenges in DCS research, to provide M&D students, supervisors, and researchers in general with strategies on how to fast-track the process of applying for ethical clearance at the Department of Correctional Services, REC. Third, to facilitate ethics education and research integrity to academics, M&D students, and supervisors conducting research in DCS's entities. And lastly, to provide DCS with evidence-based practices accomplished via local research through our M&D graduates. Now let us look at what are some of the most common and frequently asked questions around correctional services research. In terms of my experience, conducting correctional services-based research involving offenders or members of the Department of Correctional Services is often subject to a formal application, a review, and approval process by 2 or more research ethics committees. As shown on this slide, on the left-hand slide on the screen is your golden goose. Now, this is what you are aiming to receive. This is the DCS RSC certificate. Now, prior to arriving there, on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll notice that it is the first ethical clearance letter applicants need to obtain before requesting permission for ethical clearance at the Department of Correctional Services. When it is a bilateral process, for instance, 2 stages are involved. In other instances, it could be more. For example, I know for a fact that in the Department of Psychology, we have what we call the Departmental Higher Degrees Committee, which its function is to blind review the student's proposal prior to making its way to CRAC, which is the College of Human Sciences Research Ethics Committee. Now, these are some of the checkpoints, what you need to basically take into consideration, everything that relates to the study. These are details required from section 1 up until section 6. And then the second step in the process, in order to access DCS's research application forms, the first thing that you need to do would be to log on to the DCS's website and click under Research Directorate. There, you will immediately see that among other things listed on that page are A, the application dates, B, research requirements, which are listed as follows: 1, the research application form AKAG 179, number 2, the agreement form, number 3, a comprehensive research proposal accompanied by the study's consent participant, as well as the research instrument / tool intended for data collection, such as the questionnaire or interview guide. Number 4, in the event that the applicant is a student, then proof of registration is required, plus a certified ID copy of the researcher, which should not be older than 3 months. And lastly, number 5, approval letter or ethical clearance certificate issued by an REC from any South African academic institution, such as UNISA or any other recognized research council, such as the HSREC. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to our first activity of the day. And in addition to the lists we provided earlier in our introduction section on some of the methodological and ethical pitfalls picked up by the DCS REC in 2019. We want you to think about what is problematic, whether ethically or even methodologically, which contributes to challenges of obtaining ethical clearance at the DCS REC. You're welcome to think out of the box and explore the different yet similar challenges to the ones shown on the slide. For instance, if you choose methodological incongruence, explain how incongruence can become a methodological flaw by providing an example. Similarly, if you choose conflict of interest, explain how conflict of interest can become an ethical flaw by providing an example. But just to respond to a few emails that came through, I think it's also true, Natisha, that collecting data prior to receiving ethical clearance is, in fact, an ethical red flag. Once you go out there and collect data without actually receiving ethical clearance from one's institution, it does comprise an ethical red flag. And then I also agree with you, Kit, that it is also a difficult one if you find that you are collecting data and you find that there is a presence of an official. You can't really ask questions that you feel are necessary, and sometimes it so happens that participants themselves as offenders, you get the sense that there are some things that they would like to confide, but they really cannot do that. So in responding to activity number one, I think these are the some of the ethical pitfalls and the methodological pitfalls that I have come across. And we're going to take an example of a few. I'm going to discuss, let's take a few and discuss a few. For instance, coercive or undue incentives. And reading through the emails that I'm receiving, I realize that some of you might have chosen abuse due to coercive influences and to a lesser extent undue incentives, which may adversely affect offenders' capacity to give voluntary consent to research participation. Now, simple incentives such as misperceptions of early release by the parole board can be very powerful motivators which encourage participation by incarcerated individuals. Similarly, inducements such as subtle persuasions can also influence decision making and subsequent participation. And then again, assent. Other ethical pitfalls include the failure to distinguish between consent and assent. Due to their legal incapacity, participants under the age of 18 years are in principle incapable of performing legal transactions and may not choose independently whether to participate in research or not. Whereas adults, that is persons over the age of 18 years, may make independent decisions and hence consent to participating in research. With incarcerated youth offenders, one requires assent instead of consent. And then photo voice, that is capturing of photographic data and ethnography, both have policy implications for researchers. In accordance with the stipulations and regulations made by the Department of Correctional Services, researchers are generally not allowed to take photographic images of either their participants or any of the DCS entities without prior permission or approval. And we explore ethnography as we go along. To those of you who chose conflict of interest can take several forms, namely the researcher playing a dual role, such as occupying both researcher and therapist positions, or the most prevailing ethical flaw, which is the idea by the Department of Correctional Services personnel to propose a research study in their places of employment. As a rule of thumb, the DCS personnel are not permitted to conduct research within human participants, either with offenders or co-employees detained or working in the same center where they are also employed. Lastly, incorrect use of terminology. When applying to conduct research at the Department of Correctional Services, first and foremost, applicants are expected to be familiar with the correct use of terminology. Following South Africa's political dispensation in 1994, words such as warders, juveniles, and prisoners were classified derogatory and subsequently replaced with correctional officers, youth offenders, and offenders respectively. It is for the same reason that prisons or the Department of Justice was renamed in 1990 to the Department of Correctional Services. Although this is not explicitly stated by the white paper on corrections, however, scholars are conscientized on the correct use of terminology to avoid the research applications being deferred back or owing to incorrect use of terminology. And for this, I urge you to make use of Act 111 of 1998 for this terminology. And then we now get to the core of this exercise. And for this exercise, activity number 2, what is going to happen for the day is that you are all going to divide yourselves into 2 groups, Group A and Group B, where you will participate in a role play. Out of that role play, 2 things are going to happen. Number 1, there is going to be an individual activity, and number 2, a group activity where both groups A and B will be expected to collate and consolidate individual responses and provide feedback to activity 2. There are 2 instructions to the role play. Instruction number 1, I would like all of you to divide yourselves into 2 groups, A and B, and this should be done in accordance to your surnames. In other words, Group A will comprise surnames beginning with alphabet A to M, while Group B will comprise surnames beginning with alphabet N to Z. So Group A are surnames A to M, and Group B are surnames N to Z. That shouldn't be difficult. I repeat the instruction again. All workshop attendees are expected to divide themselves into 2 groups, A and B, and this is done according to your surnames. If you fall under Group A, then your surname comprises or begins with alphabet A to M, and if you are Group B, then your surname begins from N to Z. Now that we have 2 groups A and B for our role play, I would like everybody in both groups to perceive themselves as DCS REC members. In other words, for the purposes of this activity, all of you are DCS REC members. Your mandate as the DCS REC is to review and assess only one application and come to a conclusion whether the reviewed application is methodologically fit for approval or not. So that is instruction number 1. You divide yourselves. After having divided yourselves, you're going to undergo a role play. On this role play, each and everybody is going to perceive themselves as members, and they are to receive this proposal. You are supposed to review it, whether it is methodologically fit for approval or not. Now, instruction number 2, individually. What does this mean? It means that each person has the responsibility to review and assess only one proposal, either P1 or P2, depending on the respective groups A or B. Your task as REC members is to identify relevant sections in the proposals and list only methodological and not ethical strengths and weaknesses of the proposal. In other words, Group A's task is to review and assess Proposal 1, while Group B's task is to review and assess Proposal 2, both in terms of their methodological and strength and weaknesses. The time allocated for activity 2 is 15 minutes. You are encouraged to use this time to read the proposal. Once you have read the proposals beginning with Group A and subsequently followed by Group B, each group is required to enter into a 5-minute discussion and reach consensus or not to activity 2. That is, come to a conclusion whether the reviewed application is methodologically fit for approval or not. So what is going to happen, ladies and gentlemen, Tony is going to send you a link. Depending on which group you are in or you are under, then you will access that proposal. The links, Tony, I'm not quite sure whether you'd be able to assist me on this one, out of this activity. Are you with me?
Yeah, yes, I'm with you. I've sent 2 links, the one for Group A and the one for Group B. So when they click the link, they will find those proposals. We have one from Group A. They are saying the weakness is measures of validity and reliability as they are not described. And we have another member, Lucas Muswana from Group A. He's saying in the proposal, okay, ethics were not mentioned. There are two methods. It is not clear on the methodology as it talks about a questionnaire and face-to-face interviews. And the data collection tool will not collect any relevant data. So that's Lucas there from Group A. Let me scroll down. We also have responses from Group B, but let me take another one that's coming in from Group A. James is saying one of the methodological issues is that though the research did mention the sample size, he or she did not provide the population size as well as procedure used to arrive at this sample size. So that is James from Group A. Yes, another one from Group A, Anonymous is saying weakness, reason for choosing sample size. So those are responses from Group A. Virginia Mumba from Group A, she's saying the weakness is data collection will be time consuming, looking at the number of participants, that is the target population.
Tony.
So yeah, that's what I see from Group A members.
Okay, so that would be feedback for the individual activity. But yes, remember, they also have to reach or not consensus, whether do they find it ethically fit or not.
Okay, so what you're saying. So what you're saying is that as
so they have to discuss amongst themselves.
Yes, as research ethics committee members, they then have to decide whether it goes.
Yes.
Okay. So yes, after that contribution,
would they decline it based on the methodological flaws, or would they not?
Yes, so what Mr. Mdakane is saying is after you have assessed the strength and weakness, can it pass or not? So should we wait for Group A members or can we proceed with the individual feedback from Group B?
Okay, perhaps maybe in the best interest of time, shall we carry on with the feedback of Group B while Group A tries and reach consensus of whether or not, based on what they have found out, would they or would they not okay it or not? This is something that I would like to find out from them. So you can carry on, Tony, with providing feedback for Group B, but after doing that, Group B would also have to reach consensus based on what they have found.
Okay. Okay, the last one from Group A, Virginia, strength, she's saying is cost effective and generalizability. So I'll move now to Group B. Keith is saying the methodology of using a questionnaire seems not to be the best approach. He would rather have opted for an interview data collection to establish the impact of a dysfunctional management system on DCS National Head Office. The sample group could via interview share their views more in depth. A questionnaire will not be sufficient enough and valuable potential data may be lost as a result. So he's saying the interview method will overcome that oversight.
Mm-hmm.
Virginia was struggling to connect, but I guess she will give us feedback now. Gifty from Group B saying the research objective is not clearly stated and cannot be stated as explorative. It is rather indicating the problem identified. So the hypothesis stated is just the title. A hypothesis should have either a positive or negative impact stated. And he's saying the research approach and participant are well stated. So that's gift from Group B. This one from Anonymous, they didn't indicate the group, but it's talking about the strength of proposal 1. Okay, I guess it's group 1. So all the variables are clearly listed. Weakness of the proposal 1, the sampling strategy used was not correct. That's random sampling. The researcher wants to include 20 male and 20 female participants in the study. However, using random sampling gives equal chance for all study participants. Therefore, the sampling strategy will not provide 20 males and 20 female samples. So the researcher wants a questionnaire as a tool to collect data. However, the researcher informed as he or she will not stick with the qualitative method. So not clear on how to analyze information gathered using the questionnaire. Another feedback from Group B, data may not be robust enough to explain complex issues. So that's the weakness. And the strength is generalization can be made. And okay, this one, as I read it, they publish it again. So yes, those are the comments that are coming in, and I see the research committee members are starting to make the recommendation that you requested. Pinditlo is saying background information is not there. Looking at the methodology, the research proposal is not there. Why the research is conducted? So she's asking why the research is being conducted, where will the research take place, and limitation. So target groups are not clear. I'm not sure whether Pindi is in Group A or Group B. So yes, those are the comments that are coming in. And another one from Group B, the study is explorative but uses quantitative data collection method. Therefore, they decline for the methodological flaw. So this one gave the feedback as well as the recommendation. So Mr. Mdakane, I'm not sure if you want us to proceed with the decision from both groups.
Yep. I still would like to find out from them as DCS REC members, because remember, something that I am trying to elaborate on, Tony, here is the fact that you might have picked up a methodological flaw as an REC member. But the question is, do other members agree to say that what you have pointed out or what you have indicated constitutes an ethical flaw, right? So at the end of the day, as REC members, you need to reach some kind or some form of consensus, whether you agree to approve the certain or that particular application or you decline it based on those reasons. So I'd like to find out from them, Group A as well as Group B, whether do they reach consensus? What would they do if they had to reach some kind of a decision based on the two applications, which is Proposal A and Proposal B? So we can use this time to find out from them. Let them discuss among themselves, Group A and Group B, and reach a consensus. Whether do they okay it, do they not, do they reject it? I don't know whether that's clear, Tony.
Yeah, it's clear. So what I'll do, because I'm receiving responses from individual members from groups, so I will publish so that they can access or see what other members are saying from the same group. And
Yes.
how many minutes can we give them to this?
I don't know. Well, my time now is 13 minutes, exactly past 10. 4 minutes, 5 minutes? Is it fair?
Okay, 5 minutes is fair. So Sizile, what's going to happen is everyone is commenting and you can see from which group they are in. So you need to either support them or disagree with them. So Virginia, what needs to happen is you have given your individual feedback, but then as group members, you will see in the chat other members from group A will give their views on why the proposal should be approved or not. And you as a member, you have to either agree with them or disagree with them. Yes. So we are publishing every comment from each group, and yours is to decide whether the proposal goes or not, because different members from different groups have different views. So at the end of the day, the committee has to decide on whether the proposal is approved or not. I hope that's clear, Virginia. Yes, so the discussion in the background from group B, Pindi saying if the method is weak, then it will affect the outcome. And Sizile, another group member, is saying then they have to not approve this because of the methodological flaw. So the discussion is ongoing in the background. Still on group D, on group B, another member is saying they won't approve because of the methodological flaws. So we have 4 people from Group B, 4 committee members who are saying this will not be approved.
Any indication in terms of perhaps sometimes it is just disapproved, sometimes it is disapproved with conditions. So what are committee members saying? So it's blatantly rejected.
Yes, so Sizile and Pindi, what Mr. Mdakane is saying, because remember it's going back to the students, so are you not approving it? Can they maybe amend some of the things, or they have to rework the whole proposal? So what's your view on that? And from Group A, I can see it's only Lucas Moswana who's saying no, this won't be approved due to the methodological flaws mentioned, that the data collection tool will not collect any relevant data. So he's still waiting for other members to contribute in Group A. Yes, so Lucas, I can see your members are engaged now, Group A. The discussion is that data instruments are not clear, unit of analysis are a bit confusing, employees from all units, so they did not indicate how many units does the department have. So it's confusing as its impact study of leadership of employee morale, or how employees are affected by different style. So one member is saying it needs to be revisited, rework the focus and the methodology. So that's the contribution, Lucas, from your group members. Another member from Group A is that it needs to be rejected because there are too many flaws. So one is saying it can be revised, one is saying totally reject. Another member is saying the student must make changes on the methodology. They say it's explorative, but want to use questionnaire. They need to choose appropriate research design and resubmit. So you can see comments from Group A that one member is saying totally rejected, but others are saying it may be amended and can be resubmitted. So that's the discussion among the committee members. Cecile from Group 2 is saying the student must make the changes on the methodology. They say it's explorative, but want to use questionnaire. So they need to choose the appropriate research design and resubmit. So yes, Mr. Mdakane, those are the debates among the committee members there. And I must say, we must thank you for giving them the opportunity to be ethics committee members, because sometimes their proposal have been rejected, and I think this gives them a glimpse of what's happening in the background.
Yeah, couldn't be more true, Tony. I think this exercise gives you a sense of what we as REC committee members are encountering. And if I have to indicate, Tony, that this is not a made-up proposal, or these are not made-up proposals, both of them, they are proposals which were taken from proposals that were submitted in 2019. So I have used real examples to showcase and indicate that these are the types of proposals or applications that we receive as DCS REC members. So I've been listening throughout the feedback session, and yes, I'm quite happy with the feedback that you have provided, and most of what you have said. In fact, I couldn't even pick up one submission that was incorrect, which you said. I think that you are truly spot on with giving feedback to both proposals, that is P1 as well as P2, and thank you for each individual group members from Group A as well as Group B. And I hope that we learn from each other, we learn from one another. What somebody has identified, it is something that you might have overlooked. And by someone indicating that this constitutes an ethical flaw to them, might also make you, or you might pick up one or learn a few things. So I hope that we have learned from one another. If, in my case, if I had to indicate what was wrong, or what was what could constitute an ethical flaw, a methodological flaw, I mean to say, I beg your pardon, for P1, this would be the following. Compatibility is picked up in the second paragraph, where the researcher claims to use qualitative research instead of quantitative research, as the data will be collected narratively. What is incongruent here is the type of data that the researcher intends to collect, which is narrative data, and the data collection instrument, which is a questionnaire. And most of you pick that up. To solicit narrative data, one would expect that a narrative interview be used instead. And Keith also indicated that he pointed that out. And then we can also look at section 6.3. Units of analysis should be explicitly delineated from non-participants, as well as section 6.4. Indication of variables is flawed as it does not indicate the relationship between the variables. Section 6.5, the population size is not included, as are the inclusion and exclusion criteria of the study. Section 6.7, generally data triangulation is accepted and encouraged in research. However, one notices the absence of the interview guide, as well as the confusion around whether the study is also a mixed method study. Section 6.8, content analysis on the one hand is defined as the white ethnography is simply a mode of inquiry which studies a culture sharing group. Section 6.9, measures of trustworthiness was also mentioned, and all reliability and validity issues are not adequately addressed, nor how will they be implemented or executed. And then if we take a look at some of the feedback for Group B, Activity 2, I think that would be some of the strengths as well as the weaknesses. Under Section A, the research objectives are hardly explained there. Instead, this section seems to discuss what one can consider as the significance of the study. So it doesn't really constitute research objectives. Section 7, again, a research hypothesis is a and then you see these are the things that we are dealing with. Section 9.1, the research approach, that is the quantitative approach, and the data collection instrument, that is the questionnaire, but the questionnaire itself is not included. This, ladies and gentlemen, constitutes an ethical flaw because it is regarded as incomplete documentation. And if I just have to indicate and point this out, Tony, that there are many applications that are deferred, turned back on the basis that they are incomplete. And from the DCS's RSC website, it is made clear there that when you apply, there are certain stipulations, there are certain regulations, there are certain documents that you also have to include there. But you find that over time, over and over again, we have to reject applications on the basis that a simple document such as an interview guide or a questionnaire has been excluded. And then moving right along, we look at section 0.9 again. Although sampling strategies are indicated as purposive and simple random sampling, however, there is a flaw here which I have coined it as methodological trespass. Methodological trespass occurs when students employ research techniques belonging from one paradigm in another incorrect paradigm. For instance, using a non-probability sampling technique in a quantitative study. The two can only exist when the study uses a mixed method approach. So unless if your study uses a mixed method approach, you have to adhere to the specific paradigm that you are using. Section 9.3, measuring instrument is discussed, but it is not included. The number of participants is not indicated, as are the study's inclusion and exclusion criteria. And this also, again, is one of the most violated methodological flaws, an application which does not clearly delineate its inclusion and exclusion criteria. Section 9.4, data analysis is not adequately explained and also describes or subscribes to methodological trespass as well. So yeah, I think based on the feedback that we have received, the question is, So what can we conclude? What are the lessons learned? The process of data gathering in correctional centers, that is, the procedure by which information is elicited from participants, can be achieved via multiple methods depending on the study's research design. For instance, with regards to qualitatively oriented studies, popular methods of gathering data include semi-structured or open-ended interviews, participant observation, and focus group interviews. Interviews in particular are ideal for exploring the views, opinions, and/or lived experiences of participants regarding a phenomenon of interest. Consequently, sample sizes are usually small and make use of purposive sampling. By contrast, quantitative research uses methods such as questionnaires and surveys to collect structured or close-ended responses, which are then converted to numeric data. However, I must acknowledge that both categories of data collection instruments, interviews, as well as questionnaires, have implications concerning the logistics and how and where the data is collected. For instance, during interviews, either on one-on-one or focus groups, background noise can become cumbersome. Hence, prior arrangements for a noise-proof room or office must be arranged with one's internal guide before conducting the interviews. Your recorder and not a cell phone will be permitted inside the correctional center. Lastly, when using focus group interviews, is fundamentally important that researchers acknowledge that they cannot guarantee confidentiality because members of the focus group may disclose the information outside the research setting, despite signing the confidentiality clause not to do so. For this reason, the consent form should explicitly advise potential participants not to disclose any personal and/or sensitive information. With questionnaires, and largely due to the philosophical nature of quantitative research, which is to generalize its findings, the sample sizes are often too large relative to qualitative studies. Thus, recruitment and data collection strategies such as the distribution of advertisements and posters, including the administration and collection of surveys and questionnaires, are all feasible methods which are at the researcher's disposal. Yet often than not, researchers invariably use this role to that of an internal guide. Now, confusing this role is something that we've picked up as DCS RC members, and something that I have to highlight is that the DCS does not take accountability for providing personnel for field work, that is, for research activities, as these remain the researcher's core responsibilities. Similarly, when developing or adapting one's data collection instrument or instruments, possibilities of language variations, which might involve translation services, as well as differences in context, are all matters of consideration in terms of participants' literacy levels. Lastly, the data collection instrument or instruments must accompany the application form as part of the addendum. Now, with the feedback that I have given you, I hope that you'll be able to come to some kind of a conclusion or a sense of what both groups would do in this case. I have provided you with the background information of what is expected from the DCS, and based on the applications that you have just reviewed, I hope that you would have made the most the correct, in fact, decision, one that you have chosen as DCS RAC members. And then for the next activity, which is going to be similar, but not quite as similar as activity number 2, because in activity number 2, we're actually focusing on the methodological flaws, right? This time we're going to look at what could constitute an ethical flaw. the same as before. I'm going to provide you, or Tony is going to provide you with a link again so that you are able to access the proposals again and review them. Now, for the third and last activity of the day, right, you are then requested to remain in your original groups, A and B. And remember, this should be according to your surnames. But this, I guess, we would do when we come back from the break.
Mr. Simelane, welcome once more, sir.
Okay, Tony, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mdakane.
We may proceed.
Yes, before you proceed, there was a question from Group A while they were making decisions. They wanted to know how many times can a student submit a revised proposal, and for how long should they wait to receive the revised one? Thanks.
Tony, can you kindly repeat that question once more?
Okay, so they want to know that if they make a decision that the proposal must be revised, then after that, how long?
Who? When they say they make that decision, who?
The committee, the RSC. So when the ethics committee makes a
following.
Yes, when the ethics committee make a decision that this should be returned to student with minor revisions, then from there,
yeah,
how many times, if it comes back again with some mistakes, how many chances can they give a students to work on that, and for how long? The timing.
Oh, okay. Okay, all right. So thanks for the question. This is from Group A, I gather. Thanks for the question. To the best of my ability, being an REC member for the past 3 years, I have never encountered a situation where there are limits in terms of how many number of times a student or an applicant can apply. So for as long as you have the opportunity of applying, if we defer it back, if we defer an application back and say that you need to revise some of the aspects in the proposal, if you attend to those proposals, to those aspects, then chances are you are going to resubmit to once, perhaps maybe twice, then you'll be able to then be finished with the ethical clearance letter. But this depends. I need to emphasize this. This depends because as a student or as an applicant, or sometimes you might be an independent researcher, you might be doing this for a professional purpose, for a professional degree. In that regard, if you're a student, then you need to also consult your supervisor, work in hand in hand with your supervisor in order to correct or in fact to effect the changes that have been recommended by the RSEC. So I hope I have answered your questions. There are no specific number of times in which you are allowed to resubmit. And as a rule of thumb, as the DCS REC, when we receive an application, once we have reviewed it, we are expected to provide feedback within the next 14 working days. I'm subject to correction, but this is how long you wait for your response. If we have reviewed it and we collate the feedback from REC members and then we provide feedback. In fact, the REC chairperson is the one who is responsible for providing you with feedback. I hope I have answered your questions, Tony. And if there are any questions, maybe prior to moving to activity 3, I'll be more than happy to clear those. So I'm not quite sure, Tony, if yes, you are able to see any questions, yes, comments. Yeah.
There's one question that came up now. At what stage of proposal development should students need to apply for ethical clearance?
At what stage of the proposal? So it depends. Remember, I spoke about this earlier on, and I indicated that sometimes this is a bilateral process. Bilateral process in the sense that one hinges on the other. You cannot apply for DCS ethics clearance letter if you have not applied for an institutional research. So in other words, we are not going to provide you with an ethical clearance letter if you do not present an ethical clearance letter from the institution first. Remember, even when you go to the DCS REC website, it clearly indicates that stipulates the documents that are required. That one of the documents that are required is an institutional ethical clearance letter. So what needs to happen is that when you are as a student, as an independent researcher, when you are busy developing the proposal, what you first need to take into account is that you need to first have institutional ethical clearance. And thereafter, once you have the institutional ethical clearance letter, you can apply at the DCS REC. That is how your application is going to be considered and hopefully and subsequently okayed. I hope I've answered your question. Do I have another question?
No questions at this stage.
If there are no questions, I'll be more than happy to continue.
Yes, you may. Thank you.
Okay, all right. All right, thanks, Tony. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. Now we are into our third activity of the day, activity 3. As indicated there, this activity is going to take about 20 minutes. And for the third and last activity of the day, this is what I will request of you, is that you remain in your original groups, your A and B, and remember this should be in accordance with your surnames, right? Group A are surnames beginning with A to M, while Group B are surnames beginning with alphabet N to Z. Now, the two proposals that you are reviewing at this moment, one has been accepted, or one was accepted, perhaps I should rather say that, one was accepted and one was rejected out of the two proposals. I'm not quite sure which one is it, I don't remember. As REC members, your mandate this time around is to review and assess only one application and come to a conclusion whether the reviewed application is ethically fit for approval or not. So one of the applications was rejected while one was approved. I'm not quite sure which one it is. Now, similar to activity 2, each individual person has the responsibility to review and assess only one proposal. If you fall under Group A, your task is to review and assess Proposal 3, and conversely, if you fall under Group B, your task is to review and assess Proposal 4. Only this time around, your task is to identify relevant sections in the proposal and list only ethical, not methodological, only ethical strengths as well as weaknesses of the proposal, right? So, something that you might have overlooked during the activity number 2 is the fact that when we receive an application, or when you read or when you review a student's application, not only are you going to come across weaknesses, but there are only going to be strengths in that particular application or proposal. So, not being harsh, I think it is only fair to not indicate just the weaknesses, but to also indicate the strengths. So that is your mandate as REC members. So Group A, you are therefore tasked with reviewing and assessing P3, while Group B, you are tasked with reviewing and assessing P4, both in terms of ethical strength as well as weaknesses. So let us not just focus on weaknesses, but let us also identify the strength in those particular proposals. Now, group task. The time allocated for activity 3 is 15 minutes, just like before. So you are encouraged to use this time to familiarize yourselves with the proposals. Once you have read them, beginning with group A and subsequently followed by group B, each group will again enter into a 5-minute discussion and reach consensus or not to activity 3. That is, come to a conclusion whether the reviewed application is ethically fit for approval or not. So I hope at this moment, Tony has already provided you with the links where you can access these both applications. And my time now is exactly 11 o'clock exactly. So we have a 15-minute activity where you are supposed to individually review one application based on which group you fall under. And then after having reviewed and made notes of what are the ethical pitfalls, weaknesses, as well as ethical strength of that proposal, then you're going to enter into a 5-minute discussion with your respective group members in terms of, was this application that you were reviewing as group A, was it the one that was approved, or was it the one that was disapproved? So at the end of this activity, Tony, what I am looking for is one integrated answer, not in this other. I'm looking for at the end of activity 3 is some kind of a consensus, whether was this the one that was disapproved or rejected. I'll be more than happy to repeat myself again. I'm not quite sure whether that was clear enough for you, Tony, as well as for individual group members. For activity 3, it's a 20-minute activity whereby you use the 15 minutes to review the proposal based on which group you fall under. And for the next 5 minutes, you enter into a discussion with your individual group members who uploaded them. Tony?
Yes, I'm with you. We uploaded P3 and P4. So yeah, I think in 15 minutes. So should they post the strengths and weaknesses? Or they should do that after 15 minutes?
No, they do that simultaneously. If you fall under group A, then you are going to review P3. If you fall under group B, then you review P4. Your task as REC member is to identify both weaknesses and strength in terms of the ethics of the application, right? Not the method now, but the ethical aspect of the application. You review the ethics aspect application, and you identify not only weaknesses, but you also identify what are the strengths. And then you do that for 15 minutes as an individual group member. But then after having done that, right, because now my time is 5 minutes, after you having done that for 15 minutes, after having reviewed each application, then I expect group members to enter into that discussion where they reach consensus in terms of which application was reviewed, which one was rejected. So as Group A, you have to now come to a conclusion, a consensus, whether that particular application you were reviewing, was it the one that was rejected or was it the one that was approved? The same goes for Group B. I think I've made myself clear. What was the feedback from both groups, respectively, A and B? What was the feedback?
Yes, we have. Yes, from Group A, James is saying the proposal seems to have put into consideration the most critical issues of ethical concern. So that's a contribution from James. Another member from A is saying the strength is the summary sheet of what the proposal is about, and the summary sheet has been provided. The proposal is detailed on how it will be conducted and on who will be involved, and measure of analysis is clear. Risk-on parameters of sample size have been identified. Data management is outlined with no ambiguity. So ethical consideration and processes has been considered on the proposal. The checklist is attached as an appendix regarding the process and the format of the consent form. So that's one member from Group A. Okay. Yeah. We'll wait for others to come. Okay, Cecily, I see she's from Group A. She's saying the strength is that the proposal is well written and clear what the students want to conduct the study. The weakness is that there are no references. The interviews are not applicable in this study. That's from Cecily. And yes, so those are the discussion from Group A committee. I don't see any Group B members discussing, so let's give them a few seconds.
Okay. So while we are giving Group B a chance to respond, probably by providing their individual responses, I'm encouraging Group A to use this time to reach some kind of a conclusion, because the objective of the exercise is to find out whether, based on both the strength and the weaknesses of each proposal, which one was accepted, which one was rejected. So it is insufficient just to indicate what were the strengths and what were the weaknesses, right? So in a group, reach consensus as to whether that particular proposal you have reviewed, was it the one that was approved or was it the one that was rejected? I hope I'm being clear on that, Tony.
Yes, we can see one member from Group A. They are suggesting that this application was approved on issues of its ethical strength. I'm not sure if other committee members are in agreement or not. Group B, there's nothing coming up from Group B. Okay, I see Mbongiseni Mdakane from P3 is Group A, is saying proposals seem to be very detailed, clear, and all relevant information has been included. How to go about conducting and obtaining information needed for the study has been well identified. So Mbongiseni, Mr. Mdakane is saying then, as Yes, so Ndumiso, what Mr. Mdakane is saying is that as a committee, then was this the proposal that was approved or rejected? Nothing still from Group B. Maritha from Group A, she's talking about the weakness, the data to be gathered is especially sensitive and personal. Some questions in the survey might be traumatic to answers because of instances where offenders were raped. However, the participants will receive information letter explaining confidentiality, voluntary participation, non-payment, anonymity, etc. So she thinks that this proposal from Group A was accepted, given that the researcher proves or rather provides a therapist for debriefing to reduce psychological risk. So Maritha is putting that to committee members, and also still from Group A, Sizile, she thinks that no, this should be referred back mainly because of no citations, the references. So that's an argument that she's putting on the table. And other members from Group A are saying proposal, it was accepted. I saw Samantha Mweni also saying this was the proposal that was approved. So, so we are seeing, yeah, so we are seeing many more. Even James is saying that given that this proposal addressed 90% of ethical proposal, he believed that this was the approved one. So Group A members, majority of them are saying this was the proposal that was accepted. Still nothing from Group B. I'm not sure what's going on. They were active on the...
Has everybody fallen into Group A by default? I don't know. Because the instruction was clear. Where are the Group Bs?
No, they were active on the... Yeah, they were active on the previous exercises, but only seeing Group A committee members. Yeah. And we still have a full house, so they are still here.
Okay.
Yeah, so more comments from A. They are saying yes, this is the approved one. I see comments. One comment from Group B. One is saying Group B is very detailed and explain the ethics quite well. This committee member thinks that this was accepted. And Domiso from Group A, he's saying as committee, they are saying they are in agreement that this was approved. So yeah. So Group A, I think they are clear. Group B, one member saying they think this application was rejected mainly because of ethical considerations dealing with vulnerable groups of the population. The objectives were intended for reforms. Objectivity has been compromised. So one Group B member is putting that on the table.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the only comment or voice from Group B.
Okay, so what do you suggest that we do? Should we give it a moment for Group B to finalize, or do I just shoot straight into providing feedback?
I think we've given them enough time. It's only 2 comments from Group B, so maybe they will need guidance from you. And I believe Group A will appreciate the feedback that you will give them. Thanks.
Okay, all right, thanks, Tony. All right, my time is exactly 25 minutes to 12, so We have 25 minutes left until we close up, but I can go ahead and provide feedback to activity 3. And activity group A seems to have been the most active group, so I think it's only fair that I start with activity with the group A. So yeah, I agree with most of what you have indicated as being correctly true. And the summary, aims, objectives of the study, the setting, there is incorrect use of terminology. I hope that you have been able to pick that one out. Inmates versus prison, right? So we spoke about the incorrect use of terminology. The reason why I'm bringing this up is the fact that even if your study is written in such a way that all ethical aspects have been considered, but then you have to be careful in terms of the terminology that you use, right? So I spoke about this: inmates, prisoners, that in terms of Act 111 of 1998, as well as the White Paper on Corrections 2005, doesn't allow us to use such terminology as inmates or prisons, especially if the terminology is going to be used in explaining the population of your study in terms of the title, or even if we do find that instances of these words are inside the proposal itself. So under ethical considerations, I hope the following was also observed: the right to privacy as well as confidentiality were both compromised because participants' private information was being shared without their consent. Permission to access participants' files is also questionable because participants are also patients in this study. And since they are patients, approval from the provincial health department would have been necessary. There is also no indication of how harm would have been prevented should psychological discomfort occur to participants as a result of the self-administered questionnaires. To the extent that the questionnaire asks private and confidential questions, I would expect that these measures should be considered and indicated. And in highlighting this further, in emphasizing this further, I have to indicate that it is important, incumbent upon yourself as an applicant, to think of the inevitability. What would happen in the instance that the questions that I ask are going to psychologically cause discomfort? So not necessarily that you are going to construct questions that are intended to cause psychological discomfort. I don't think you would be necessarily going out of your own way to construct such questions. But it is incumbent on you as an applicant to think ahead. What if the questions that I am asking my participants is going to arouse some kind of psychological discomfort? This is where now you should think psychological intervention, right? So now, some of the weaknesses is the incorrect use of terminology as indicated on the screen right there: right to privacy, confidentiality, psychological discomfort, as well as the ethical clearance letter not included. So if it's missing, it's also an ethical, because an ethical fault because of incomplete documentation. But in terms of the strength, I think you might have also picked it up that by virtue of applying for or including the ethical clearance letter from another REC also means that applicant complied with what the DCS REC wants. And then in terms of Group B, but of course, there are many others that I would also not go into. But as I was listening to Tony, I could also pick up that you got the gist of what was ethically questionable with that application. And then in terms of Group B, well, this one, yeah, academic writing is a skill. And I cannot overemphasize this. Although a number of ethical considerations are mentioned in the proposal, such as informed consent, privacy, anonymity, confidentiality, as well as avoidance of harm. However, the researcher will not inform the participants as to what is going to happen during the whole research process, because that is a rather top-down approach where instead power inequality between researchers and participants are flattened. The researcher must use terminology used in the white paper on corrections in South Africa, which is offenders, not prisoners. And DCS officials are not allowed to give out parolees information. And this often, as applicants or as researchers, we take this for granted and assume that part of the work that we are supposed to do, a correctional official will somehow do it on your behalf. It doesn't happen like that. You have to clearly know how to distinguish your role as a researcher to that of an internal guide, right? So once you are appointed an internal guide, it doesn't mean that now the purpose and the role of the internal guide is to help you perform your research activities. It doesn't happen like that. Furthermore, the researcher, something that I also pointed out, that the researcher did not include ethical clearance letter from the university, and we spoke about this as being a red flag. If you haven't included an ethical clearance letter or an initial ethical clearance letter from your institution, there's no way that you are going to be provided an ethical clearance letter by the DCS. Something again to also point out, with reference to application for Group B, is that the participant information in itself lacks key information. For an example, it talks about the researcher will prohibit physical discomfort instead of addressing issues of possible psychological discomfort. Furthermore, it lacks contact details of the supervisor or the REC, which gave permission to the study should there be any inquiries. And this is something that we take for granted, the fact that we include, or we tend to exclude pertinent and relevant information such as this. Your participant information sheet, the document that you provide to your participants when you approach them, and then when you explain in detail what the study is about. Now, remember, this happens at a recruitment phase where you recruit your participants. You need to be detailed about your study, what your study is about, the aims and objectives of the study, and what is expected of the participants themselves. But what we tend to exclude or overlook is to include the details of the supervisor or the details of the REC, which provided you permission to conduct the study, so that in the event that there is some kind of questions arousing with regards to the study, then the participant has the right, remember, because of autonomy, the participant has the right to contact either your supervisor if you're a student, or the REC if the participant has any questions. So we tend to overlook that information. So having looked at both the methodological flaws as well as the ethical flaws, what can we conclude? What are the lessons learned? For me, correctional services research varies in terms of the degree of risk it poses to research participants and whether the research itself can be classified as invasive or non-invasive. Partly attributed to the stigma and sensitivity linked to the offenses committed by offenders, specific groups of participants, such as pedophiles and sexual offenders, may be too timid to participate in research, hence known as the hidden population. For this reason, obtaining informed consent for a qualitative study often becomes a tricky process, partly dedicated to building rapport with study participants prior to the commencement of the study. This does not only ensure that the study abides by ethical standards, but at the same time, it establishes an atmosphere of trust and openness wherein a relationship is built, which is the most intimate details might be discussed. Now, how exactly is this accomplished, you may ask? Through a detailed participant information, one that I've just alluded to now, the researcher undertakes the responsibility to inform all potential participants about the nature and purpose of the study, including the fact that participation in the study is voluntary. Voluntary participation in research is threefold. It implies, 1, that study participants have a choice to either participate or decline to participate in a study. Number 2, they can decline to answer any question at any stage during the interview. And number 3, can withdraw from participating in the study without being adversely affected. And last but not least, constituting the cornerstone of ethics is the protection of the participant's identity and privacy. As a rule of thumb, participants' real names or any other identifier or identifiers are generally not divulged during research owing to possible and subsequent victimization. Instead of participants' real names, real names are often replaced with either numbers or pseudonyms. Not only does this ensure the participants' privacy and confidentiality, it also demonstrates the principle of respect for persons. Privacy in this context describes the person's interest in controlling access to the participant's personal information, while confidentiality concerns whether and how research data might be disclosed carelessly or inadvertently, thus revealing the participant's identity, making them vulnerable and susceptible to harm. The process outlined immediately above, that is, informing study participants about the details of the study before a decision is made, is known as the informed consent process. It is only when this process has been successfully concluded that participants may be asked to sign the consent form. Now, in terms of closure, what I would prefer and appreciate from committee members is to identify what were the strengths and the weaknesses of the workshop, what can we do to better improve the workshop, and if you have any possible suggestions. What are the key areas that you would like us to address in our next workshop? What do you think we have left out that you think we might possibly include? With that, Tony, I would also like to thank each and every person who was able to attend this workshop. I hope it was to the best of your interest. And if there are any questions with regards to what I have just outlined, my time is 10 minutes to 12. I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions, concerns, or if there's anything that you'd like me to explain before we wrap. As we normally do, we ask Tony to provide the feedback of the workshop directly to him, and then we get our response from, or we receive our response from Tony in terms of our areas of improvement for the next workshop. So Tony, if you are able to see any questions, comments that are directed to us, please, I think this would be the perfect time, unless if there are any, and then I would propose closure. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mdakane. I see one question has come in. They want to know if there are any research title or areas that can be considered as ethically non-viable due to the sensitivity of this subject matter, as indicated by the hidden population mentioned. Does this mean that they are simply not accessible?
Well, the question is quite tricky, but I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability. And the reason why I'm saying the question is tricky is because let us assume that you would like to conduct your research with youth offenders. And take note, I'm specifically indicating to youth offenders because that is an acceptable terminology to be used. In the event that you would like to conduct your research in one of the youth centers in South Africa, you have to remember that there is a difference between what is called assent and what is called consent. I did highlight this to say that if you are conducting research with youth offenders, then you would have to solicit what we call assent. And receiving assent is quite difficult in the sense that even if the youth offender, him or herself, they agree to participate, but the fact that they are underage, they cannot give, they cannot be allowed to participate in research provided there is somebody guiding who is going to agree for on behalf of the youth to participate. So it is not easy. Sometimes in my line of work, I conduct research with offenders who are sentenced to life imprisonment. It is difficult sometimes to conduct research with people who are, sentenced to that amount or that number of years, because sometimes as researchers we come across as being out there to collect data in order to get our degrees and have publish our papers, but thereafter we never make it back to the Correctional Test Center to say that thank you guys, you participated in this research, and probably maybe this is what I can offer you: a copy of a dissertation, a link of the research title itself. I know that we get into what can you promise participants, but I think these are some of the concerns that I've received, that sometimes, as researchers, we go out there to collect data and never come back to say thank you. So we sort of are burning bridges, but there are certain groups of offenders that I can say it is really difficult to access. Your aged offenders. In the event that you are looking at aged offenders, sometimes it is difficult as a researcher to approach them and have their consent to participate in the research. But it doesn't mean to say that you cannot have access. I'm just saying that it is sometimes, a difficult process that one has to engage in. But if you're determined, please go ahead and do that. I think I have answered that question to the best of my ability, Tony. Thank you.